It was a bright summer afternoon, the kind of day when the sun felt warm but friendly, and the air was filled with the smell of freshly cut grass. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, children rode their bikes, parents tended to their gardens, and laughter floated through the air. At the end of Maple Street, a small group of teenagers had gathered for a birthday party. They had decorated the backyard with colorful balloons, a small banner, and a long table filled with snacks, cold drinks, and a big chocolate cake. Music played softly in the background, happy, youthful tunes that made everyone smile. Among the crowd was Marcus, a 16-year-old boy with bright eyes and an easygoing smile. He was polite, kind, and known around school as someone who never caused trouble. He was the kind of teen who helped teachers carry boxes, stayed out of drama, and always looked after his friends. Today, he was just there to celebrate his classmate Ryan's birthday. They laughed, played games, and took turns telling funny stories about their school life. It was the kind of peaceful, ordinary afternoon that no one would expect to turn into something serious. Across the street lived Linda, a middle-aged white woman who liked things quiet and orderly. She had moved into the neighborhood a few years ago, and although she often smiled at people, she didn't really talk much to anyone. She watched everything that happened around her house carefully, almost like a self-appointed guardian of the street. When the music started playing and the teenagers began arriving, she frowned slightly. From her window, she saw a few Black and Hispanic teens among the guests, and instead of seeing them as kids having fun, her mind began to create a different picture. She thought maybe they didn't belong there. Maybe they were being too loud. Maybe they were up to something. The truth was, the music wasn't even that loud and the teens weren't doing anything wrong. They were just laughing, talking, and enjoying the sunny day. But Linda, sipping her iced tea by the window, began feeling uneasy. She didn't recognize Marcus or a few of the other kids. Her thoughts turned suspicious. Who are they? Why are they here? Are they from around this neighborhood? She whispered to herself. Marcus noticed her once or twice. Every time he glanced toward the street, he saw her curtains move, as if someone was watching. He didn't think much of it. He smiled and turned his attention back to his friends. They were setting up a small speaker to play their favorite songs, and Ryan's mom brought out more food, telling everyone to eat before the cake melted. It was all joy and laughter, nothing that should have made anyone uncomfortable, but Linda couldn't stop watching. Her thoughts began to twist harmless moments into threats. When one of the boys dropped a soda can and laughed, she thought they were fighting. When another leaned over to fix the speaker, she thought they were breaking something. Her mind turned normal teen behavior into trouble, and instead of walking over and asking politely to lower the volume, she decided to stay behind her window and judge from a distance. As the afternoon went on, Marcus went to help Ryan's mom carry some trays from the kitchen. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said kindly. "You kids are so well behaved." Marcus smiled. He was always raised to be respectful. His mother, Mayor Denise Walker, taught him that kindness and self-control spoke louder than words. He didn't brag about who his mother was. Most people at the party didn't even know. To him, she wasn't the mayor. She was just his mom who always believed in doing the right thing. By around 4 p.m., the sun had started to dip a little, making the backyard glow golden. The kids were dancing, taking pictures, and laughing again. That's when Linda's irritation turned into something else, suspicion. She stepped outside, folded her arms, and muttered, "This is getting out of hand." She walked to her driveway, looked across the street, and stared directly at Marcus. He noticed, and for a second their eyes met. Her expression wasn't friendly, it was cold, disapproving, like he had done something wrong without even knowing what. He looked away and tried to ignore it. "Hey Marcus, come join the dance," one of his friends shouted. He smiled and joined in, deciding not to let one angry neighbor ruin his mood. But Linda couldn't let it go. To her, the laughter felt like noise. The joy felt like disturbance. The unfamiliar faces looked like strangers invading her peaceful street. Inside her house, she picked up her phone and hovered over the screen. Her thoughts raced. Should I call the police? Maybe I should. They're probably causing trouble. They might not even live here. She convinced herself that she was doing the right thing, protecting her neighborhood. She had no idea that the decision she was about to make would change everything, not just for her, but for the boy across the street, the party, and even the entire community. As the music played softly in the background and Marcus laughed with his friends, Unaware of what was coming, Linda's finger pressed the call button. "Hello, yes," she said quickly into the phone. "There's a group of suspicious teens having a loud party next door. I think they might be up to something." The officer on the other end took the report seriously. Linda gave the address, glancing again through her window. Marcus was handing out slices of cake, smiling and laughing. But she didn't see a happy teenager. She only saw what her prejudice wanted her to see. The party continued in pure innocence, but far away, police sirens had already started to echo. What began as a beautiful summer afternoon full of laughter was about to turn into something no one would forget. Linda sat on her couch, clutching her phone, her heart beating fast. She had already called the police, but now that the call was made, she felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Part of her told herself she was doing the right thing, keeping the neighborhood safe or so, but deep down something didn't sit right. She peeked through the curtains again. The teens were still laughing, still happy, still harmless. For a moment she hesitated, wondering if she had overreacted, but it was too late. The police were already on their way. Across the street, Marcus and his friends had no idea what was coming. They were eating cake, joking about who would finish the last slice and taking selfies. Ryan's mom was collecting plates, humming softly. The peaceful afternoon had no signs of the storm about to hit. Suddenly, faint sirens began to echo from a distance. At first, no one paid attention. It was a common city sound. But the noise grew louder, closer, until flashing red and blue lights reflected on the trees. The laughter stopped. Everyone turned toward the street. A police car slowed down and parked right in front of the house. Two officers stepped out, one tall, serious-looking man and another younger officer still adjusting his badge. Their expressions were neutral but cautious. The atmosphere instantly changed. The air that had been filled with laughter now felt heavy and uncertain. Ryan's mom frowned and whispered, "What on earth is going on?" Marcus froze, his chest tightening. He had felt this kind of moment before. That sudden silence, the nervous glances, the feeling that everyone was waiting for something to go wrong. His friends whispered to each other, trying to figure out if someone had done something illegal. But they hadn't. It was just a birthday party. Linda stepped outside, walking quickly toward the officers. Her voice was sharp, confident, almost proud. "Yes, officer, thank you for coming," she said, waving her hand toward the backyard. "That's the group I was talking about. They've been loud all afternoon, and some of them don't even live here. I think they're trespassing or maybe causing trouble." The older officer looked where she pointed. The teen stood there awkwardly, unsure what to do. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "are you the homeowner?" "No, but I live next door. This used to be a quiet neighborhood before." She stopped herself, but her tone said enough. The officer sighed. "All right, we'll check it out." He started walking toward the group while Linda stood back, arms crossed, waiting for him to handle it. Ryan's mom stepped forward immediately. "Good afternoon, officers," she said politely but with concern. "Is there a problem?" "We received a call about possible disturbance and trespassing," the officer explained. Ryan's mom blinked in surprise. "A disturbance? It's just my son's birthday party. These are all his school friends." The younger officer looked around. Nothing looked suspicious, just kids, snacks, music, and laughter that had already stopped. "Do you have identification, ma'am?" he asked gently. She nodded and went inside to get it. Meanwhile, the older officer approached Marcus, who was standing quietly by the table. "Son, do you live here?" he asked. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No, sir. I'm just here for the party. Name? Marcus Walker." The officer wrote it down. Marcus could feel every pair of eyes on him. His friends, the neighbors, even Linda watching smugly from the sidewalk. His throat felt dry. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but the situation still scared him. He'd seen videos, heard stories, and deep down he just wanted to go home. Ryan came over trying to help. "Officer, he's my friend. We all go to the same school. He's not doing anything wrong." "I understand," the officer said calmly. "We just have to check everything out." The sound of his pen scratching on the notepad felt louder than the music ever did. Linda's expression softened into fake concern. "See, officer, I told you. I just didn't feel safe with all these boys hanging around." One of the teens muttered under his breath, "This is messed up." The younger officer noticed the tension and spoke gently. "No one's in trouble. We just got a call and have to make sure everything's fine." Ryan's mom returned with her ID. "You can check," she said firmly. "This is my house, and these are all invited guests." The officers nodded. Everything looked normal, yet the mood had changed completely. The kids looked uncomfortable, their joy replaced by silence. Marcus stood there, trying not to show fear, but his hands trembled slightly. The officer noticed. "You okay, son?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said softly. "Just surprised, that's all." At that moment, another car pulled up. A sleek black sedan that didn't belong to anyone on the street. The driver stepped out quickly, wearing a crisp navy blue dress and a calm but commanding expression. The officers immediately recognized her. Marcus's heart lifted with relief and embarrassment all at once. It was his mother, Mayor Denise Walker. She walked straight toward her son, then turned to the officers with controlled authority. "Is there a problem here?" she asked. Her tone was polite, but there was an edge to it, the kind that made people listen. Linda, realizing who she was, froze completely. Her confident expression melted away. The officers straightened up quickly. "Madam Mayor," one of them said respectfully, "we received a call about a possible disturbance." Denise looked around. The decorations, the quiet group of teens, her nervous son. "A disturbance?" she repeated calmly. "Looks like a birthday party to me." The officer nodded awkwardly. "Yes, ma'am, it seems that way." Linda's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She suddenly felt the weight of her own actions. The prejudice, the assumptions, the mistake. She had called the police on the mayor's son for simply attending a birthday party. The once cheerful street now stood silent, every neighbor watching. Marcus's mother looked at her son, then back at Linda. Her eyes said everything: disappointment, strength, and quiet power. What began as a simple phone call had turned into a life-changing moment, one that would soon shake the entire neighborhood. The air felt heavy, almost frozen in time. No one moved. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, not quite knowing what to do next. The mayor's sudden appearance had changed everything in an instant. The laughter that once filled the yard was now replaced by silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city beyond the neighborhood. Marcus stood beside his mother, trying to keep his composure. He wanted to speak, to explain, but words refused to come out. He could still feel the officer's questions echoing in his mind. "Do you live here? What's your name?" Even though they were polite, something about being singled out in front of everyone left him embarrassed and small. Mayor Denise Walker took a slow breath, her sharp eyes moving from the officers to Linda, who stood a few steps away, clutching her phone like it was her shield. The mayor's tone was calm, but firm. "I'd like to know," she said, "why my son and his friends are being questioned at a birthday party." The older officer straightened. "Ma'am, we received a call from a concerned neighbor about suspicious activity and possible trespassing. We were just following procedure." Denise nodded slowly. "And what exactly seemed suspicious? The balloons, the cake, the laughter?" Her voice carried no anger, but it had power, the kind that came from truth. Linda swallowed hard, suddenly wishing she could disappear. I just thought something wasn't right," she stammered. "There were so many kids, and some of them looked unfamiliar." The mayor turned to face her fully. "Unfamiliar?" she repeated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Or different?" The question hung in the air like a weight no one wanted to touch. The officers shifted uncomfortably. Ryan's mother crossed her arms, watching silently, her expression caught between disbelief and anger. The kids whispered to each other in low voices, realizing they were part of something bigger than a misunderstanding. Linda tried to recover. "No, that's not what I meant. I didn't recognize them. And it's my responsibility to make sure everything's safe around here." Denise took a step closer. "Safe from what? Teenagers eating cake? Singing songs?" Linda's face turned red. Her confidence from earlier had completely vanished. She looked at the ground, unable to meet the mayor's eyes. "I didn't mean any harm," she whispered. Marcus watched the scene unfold quietly, his emotions mixed, part relief that his mom was there, part shame that she had to be. He wished it could all just end. His friend stood awkwardly behind him, unsure whether to stay or leave. The older officer cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. "Madam Mayor, we can confirm that there's no issue here. We'll file the call as a false alarm." Denise nodded, but her tone was still edged with disappointment. No issue now, perhaps. But there was an issue the moment someone looked at a group of teenagers and decided they were dangerous based on what they looked like. Her words carried through the quiet street like a truth no one could argue with. Even the younger officer lowered his gaze, realizing the situation had turned into something much deeper than a noise complaint. Ryan's mom stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Linda," she said, "these kids were just having fun. You could have come over and spoken to me instead of calling the police." Linda finally looked up, her eyes glassy. I didn't think." "That's the problem," Denise replied softly. "Too many people don't think. They just react." For a long moment, no one said anything. The police officers quietly excused themselves, murmuring apologies before heading back to their car. The flashing lights faded away, leaving behind a strange quiet, one that didn't feel peaceful anymore. As the car drove off, Ryan turned to Marcus. "Man, I can't believe that just happened." Marcus forced a small smile. "Yeah, welcome to my world." His words were simple, but they hit everyone hard. The other teens looked at each other, suddenly aware of something they hadn't noticed before, how one person's fear or bias could so easily turn happiness into fear. Linda stayed frozen on her driveway, watching as the mayor walked her son back toward the yard. "Marcus, are you okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I'm fine, Mom. Just embarrassed, I guess." She smiled gently, brushing his shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong, remember that." "I know," he said quietly. "But it still feels wrong." She looked at him with pride and sadness. "That's because it is wrong. And it's not your burden to carry, son. It's theirs to fix." Linda could still hear her words from across the street. They cut through her chest like a quiet truth she had ignored for years. She wanted to walk over and say sorry, but her feet wouldn't move. The guilt was too heavy, the shame too strong. As the sun began to set, the party slowly resumed, but the laughter didn't sound the same. The teens smiled, but their smiles were weaker now, thoughtful. The joy had been replaced with something else. Awareness. Denise stayed a little longer, helping Ryan's mom clean up. She spoke softly to her son, reminding him that grace was stronger than anger. "People make mistakes, Marcus," she said gently. "What matters is how we respond to them." He nodded, staring at the ground. "Do you think she'll ever understand?" His mother looked across the street at Linda's house, where the curtains were drawn once again. "Maybe," she said. "Sometimes people don't change until the truth knocks right on their door." That night, the quiet street looked peaceful again, but it wasn't the same. Everyone had seen what prejudice looked like, and how quickly it could ruin peace. For Marcus, the moment had left a scar, but also a strength. For Linda, it left a question she couldn't escape. What kind of neighbor and what kind of person did she want to be? The evening sky turned golden, and the soft breeze carried the faint smell of summer flowers through the neighborhood. The street was quiet again, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that came after something uncomfortable, something people didn't quite know how to talk about. Mayor Denise Walker stood by her car for a long moment after the officers left. She watched the blue and red lights fade into the distance and then turned her eyes to the group of teens still gathered in the backyard. Their laughter had faded into murmurs and even the music had stopped. Marcus was standing off to the side, pretending to scroll through his phone, but she could see the sadness in his posture. She knew that feeling all too well, the heavy mix of embarrassment, fear, and quiet anger that came from being wrongly judged. She walked toward the backyard gate with calm, deliberate steps. The kids noticed her immediately. Some looked relieved, others nervous. Even Ryan's mom seemed unsure of what to say. Denise smiled softly, trying to bring some warmth back to the moment. "Is everyone all right?" she asked gently. Ryan's mom nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry this happened. It was supposed to be just a fun afternoon for the kids. I know, Denise said kindly, and it still can be. But first I'd like to speak with the person who called the police. Her tone was calm, not angry, not loud, just steady. That kind of calm that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Linda, who had retreated back toward her front yard, froze when she heard those words. She turned slowly and saw Denise walking toward her, hands folded neatly, her expression unreadable. For the first time that day, Linda realized who she had called the police on. She had seen the mayor on TV, on community posters, at public events, always confident, kind, respected. And now that same woman stood in front of her, not as a politician, but as a mother whose child had just been humiliated because of her own assumptions. Denise stopped a few feet away, maintaining her composure. You must be the one who made the call, she said softly. Linda's throat tightened. Yes, I called. I didn't mean to, I just thought something was going on. Denise tilted her head slightly. Something like what? Linda hesitated. I saw a lot of kids, some I didn't recognize, and the music was loud. I thought maybe there was... Trouble? Denise repeated, her voice calm but piercing. From what exactly? Kids celebrating a birthday? Linda opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wanted to explain, but every excuse she thought of sounded hollow. Denise continued, her tone firm but controlled. You saw young people laughing and assumed they were a threat. You didn't see joy. You didn't see friendship. You saw danger because some of them didn't look like you. Those words hit Linda like a wave. Her shoulders dropped. I swear that's not what I meant, she said weakly. Denise sighed quietly. I know you probably didn't mean harm, but the problem is you did cause harm. You made my son, a 16-year-old boy who's done nothing wrong, feel like a criminal at his friend's birthday party. Linda's lips trembled. I didn't know he was your son. Denise's eyes softened, but her voice stayed strong. Would it have mattered if he wasn't? Would you have treated him differently if he didn't have someone important to protect him? Linda looked down. The guilt stung worse than she expected. She realized how easy it had been for her to assume, to fear, to judge, without a single question asked. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The neighborhood watched from behind half-open curtains. The setting sun painted the sky orange and pink, making the scene look almost unreal, a quiet confrontation filled with truth. Denise finally broke the silence. You know, I work every day to make this city safer and for everyone. And yet here we are, right in my own neighborhood, where my son can't even attend a birthday party without being treated like a suspect. Linda swallowed hard. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believe you, Denise said. But I also believe that being sorry isn't enough. You have to understand what you did, and not to me, not even to my son, but to this whole community. Fear spreads quickly when we let it control us. Linda nodded slowly. You're right. I was wrong, I didn't think. That's the problem, Denise said softly, echoing her earlier words. Too many people don't think before they act. Across the street, Marcus watched his mother with quiet pride. She didn't yell. She didn't insult. She stood strong, the way she always told him to stand when facing injustice. It was the same strength that made her a good mayor and an even better mother. Ryan's mom came forward, holding a glass of water toward Linda. Maybe we should all sit down, she said gently. Talk like neighbors. Linda looked surprised, almost relieved. Yes, I'd like that, Denise nodded. Good, because this is how change starts. Not by shouting, not by blaming, but by understanding. The three women sat at the edge of the yard, the teens slowly relaxing again. Marcus finally smiled a little, seeing things calm down. The sun slipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawns, and the tension that had once filled the street began to fade. By the time the stars began to appear, the noise of laughter returned, quieter this time, but genuine. The kids resumed their games, and Ryan's mom served the remaining slices of cake. Linda even managed a small smile, though her mind was full of reflection. She knew she couldn't undo what she'd done, but she could start doing better. From the corner of her eye, she saw Denise glance at her once more, not with anger, but with something more powerful, forgiveness mixed with expectation. It was the kind of look that said, "You've learned something today. Don't forget it." That night, the neighborhood learned more than just a lesson about noise or parties. They learned how easily fear could turn into injustice, and how courage and grace could turn it back into understanding. The next morning, the sun rose over Maple Street as if trying to erase the tension from the night before. Birds chirped, sprinklers hissed, and neighbors went about their routines as though nothing had happened. But something had changed. The quiet street didn't feel quite the same anymore. It carried the memory of flashing police lights, uneasy stares, and a conversation that had shaken everyone who witnessed it. Inside her home, Linda sat at her kitchen table, her coffee untouched and cold. The events from the previous day replayed in her mind again and again. Marcus's frightened face, the calm power in the mayor's voice, the weight of her own words. She hadn't slept properly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the expression in Denise's eyes. Not hateful, but deeply disappointed. Across the street, Marcus was getting ready for school. He moved slower than usual, his mind still on what had happened. His friends had texted him trying to cheer him up, saying things like, "Forget her, bro, and you did nothing wrong." But Marcus couldn't forget. He felt exposed, like the whole world had suddenly reminded him that no matter how good he was, some people would still see him through the wrong lens. His mother, Mayor Denise Walker, was in the kitchen making breakfast. She noticed his silence. "You didn't eat much," she said softly. "I'm not really hungry," he replied. She put down her cup and sat beside him. "I know yesterday was hard, but you handled it well. You stayed calm. I'm proud of you." Marcus gave a weak smile. "It's just embarrassing. Everyone saw, and she didn't even know who you were. What if you weren't there, Mom? What would have happened?" Denise looked down for a moment, her expression serious. "That's exactly what scares me," she said quietly. "There are many kids like you who don't have someone to step in. That's why we have to keep fighting for change." He nodded slowly. "You think she feels bad?" "Oh, she feels bad," Denise said with a small sigh. "But guilt alone doesn't change people. Understanding does." Meanwhile, Linda stood by her window again, the same spot where it had all begun. Only this time she wasn't watching suspiciously. She was reflecting. She thought about how she had seen Marcus that day, not as a teenager celebrating a birthday, but as a potential threat. The thought made her stomach twist. She realized how automatic that reaction had been, and how dangerous that kind of thinking was. Her phone buzzed, a message from her friend in the neighborhood group chat. "Did you hear what happened yesterday? I can't believe you called the cops on the mayor's son." Linda's face flushed red. She hadn't realized how quickly the story had spread. More messages followed, some judging her, some expressing shock. She tried to reply, typing, "I didn't mean to," but deleted the words. There was no excuse that could make it right. Later that day, local reporters began to catch wind of the story. Someone had filmed a small part of the incident, just enough to show the police cars, the mayor arriving, and the awkward confrontation in the street. The clip started circulating online, and within hours, it became a trending topic in the city. "White woman calls police on mayor's black son at neighborhood party." The headline spread like wildfire. Denise didn't want the attention, but she knew it was inevitable. Her office received dozens of calls, and reporters camped outside the city hall, hoping for a statement. When she finally stepped up to the podium, she didn't show anger. She showed grace. "I'm not here to shame anyone," she said firmly. "But I do want people to think before they act. My son was doing nothing wrong. He was simply existing, laughing, living, and that was enough for someone to see him as a problem. We can't keep pretending that bias doesn't exist when it lives right next door." Her words echoed across the city. People admired her calmness, her strength, and her refusal to turn pain into hate. Linda watched the speech from her living room, tears running down her face. Every word pierced her heart because she knew it was meant for people like her, people who didn't think they were part of the problem, until their actions proved otherwise. The consequences didn't stop there. Her phone kept buzzing, but now it was from her workplace. Her boss called her in, concerned about the growing public attention. Some of her coworkers had already seen the video and were distancing themselves. The guilt became unbearable. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Linda made a decision. She walked across the street to the Walker home. Her hands trembled as she rang the doorbell. When Denise opened the door, her face was calm, though clearly surprised. Mrs. Walker, Linda began, her voice unsteady. I came to apologize. Truly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I understand now how wrong I was. I judged your son without reason. I let fear guide me instead of decency. Denise studied her face for a moment, then stepped aside slightly. Come in, she said quietly. They sat at the dining table, the same place Marcus had eaten breakfast that morning. Linda's eyes were red. I've lived here for years, she said, and I thought I was a good person. But now I see that being good isn't about meaning well. It's about thinking, understanding, and seeing people as people. Denise nodded slowly. That's the beginning of real change. I'd like to help, Linda said suddenly. In any way I can, with your community programs, your youth projects, anything. I need to make this right. For the first time since the incident, Denise smiled. Then start there, she said. Not by forgetting what happened, but by learning from it. When Linda left that night, she felt lighter, not forgiven but awakened. The truth had finally settled in, and with it came a quiet determination to be different. Across the street, Marcus watched her from the window. Do you think she really means it? He asked. His mother looked at him and nodded. Maybe she does. Sometimes the hardest lesson leaves the deepest change. News spread faster than wildfire. Within 24 hours, the small town of Maplewood became the center of national attention. What had started as a neighborhood misunderstanding had now turned into a citywide conversation about race, bias, and justice. The video clip of the white woman calling the police on the black teen at the summer party was being shared on every social media platform imaginable. Comment sections overflowed with anger, support, disbelief, and debate. Some people defended Linda, saying she'd just made a mistake. Others were furious, calling her a symbol of the everyday prejudice that black families faced. Hashtags like "How to Justice for Marcus" and "How to Do Better Maplewood" began trending. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a movement. At the City Hall, Mayor Denise Walker faced a storm of reporters, requests for interviews, and thousands of emails. She didn't ask for this spotlight, but she knew she couldn't ignore it. She was calm, professional, but her eyes carried exhaustion. Every word she spoke was measured. This isn't about one person, she told the press. It's about a pattern, one that keeps repeating until we have the courage to face it. Meanwhile, Marcus was trying to live a normal teenage life, but nothing felt normal anymore. He'd gone from being that kid from Maple Street to being recognized everywhere he went. At school, teachers treated him more carefully. Classmates whispered about him, and people he barely knew came up to say how brave he was. But Marcus didn't feel brave. He just wanted things to go back to how they were before that night. During lunch, his best friend Jalen sat across from him. Man, you're famous, Jalen joked lightly, trying to lift the mood. Marcus forced a small smile. Yeah, well, I didn't ask for it. I know, Jalen said. But maybe it's a good thing. People are finally talking about this stuff. Marcus shrugged. Maybe. But I just wish they weren't talking about me. Across town, Linda faced a different kind of attention, the kind no one ever wants. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Strangers sent her angry messages calling her names. Someone even posted her address online. When she went out for groceries, people stared, whispered, or avoided her completely. Her own friends from the neighborhood group chat had stopped replying. She had thought the worst moment of her life was when she saw the mayor on her lawn. But this was worse. This was lasting. Her mistake was now public, permanent, and everywhere. One evening, she sat in her living room scrolling through the hundreds of comments on the video. Some were hateful, yes, but some were thoughtful. People shared their own stories about being judged unfairly, about calling the police too quickly, or about moments they wished they could take back. For the first time, Linda read those words not as criticism, but as lessons. Later that night, she opened her laptop and began typing. She wrote a public post, pouring her heart into it. I was wrong. I judged someone unfairly because of a prejudice I didn't even realize I had. My fear hurt a child, humiliated his family, and reminded us all how easy it is to be blind to our own bias. I don't expect forgiveness, but I do hope to change. I am working with the mayor's office to support youth and diversity programs, and I will spend the rest of my time here trying to make it right. She posted it, closed her laptop, and sat still. She didn't know how people would react, but for the first time she felt honest. The next morning, the post was everywhere. Some praised her for owning up to her mistake. Others said it wasn't enough. The internet rarely agreed on anything, and this was no exception. But quietly, something was shifting. People weren't just talking about her. They were talking about what she represented, about what needed to change in their own hearts and neighborhoods. Mayor Denise saw the post too. She read it carefully, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. A week later, the city council held a community meeting about discrimination and bias awareness. The hall was packed, standing room only. People of all colors and backgrounds filled the seats, eager to listen, argue, and learn. Cameras lined the back wall. On the stage sat Mayor Denise, a few community leaders, and to everyone's surprise, Linda. When it was her turn to speak, Linda's hands trembled as she gripped the microphone. "A few weeks ago," she began, her voice soft but clear, "I made a terrible mistake. I thought I was protecting my neighborhood, but I was really protecting my own fear. And that fear hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I can't change what I did, but I can change who I am." The audience was silent. Some nodded. Some folded their arms. But everyone listened. When she sat down, Mayor Denise took the mic next. "Acknowledgement is the first step," she said. "But our goal isn't to shame, it's to build understanding. Change happens when people are willing to be uncomfortable for the sake of progress." The room broke into quiet applause. After the meeting, Linda approached Marcus. He stood tall, wearing his school hoodie, his face calm but thoughtful. "Hi, Marcus," she said softly. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I want you to know I'm trying." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Trying is a good start," he said simply, then turned to walk away. That small exchange, simple, honest, and raw, was worth more than 1,000 apologies. Because it wasn't about making things perfect, it was about moving forward. And for the first time in weeks, the neighborhood of Maplewood felt like it was breathing again. Not fixed, not healed, but learning. Weeks passed, and the noise around the incident began to fade, replaced by something quieter. Reflection. Maplewood, once just a peaceful little suburb where everyone minded their own business, had turned into a place where people actually started talking, listening, and looking at each other differently. What had begun as a moment of shame had become a spark of awareness. The city had changed little by little. After the mayor's speech and the community meeting, new programs started forming: diversity clubs at the high school, workshops about bias, neighborhood gatherings focused on understanding instead of judgment, and for the first time, people who had lived side by side for years began learning each other's stories. Marcus had changed too. He was no longer just the boy from the video. He was back to being a normal teenager, but with a new kind of confidence. He walked into school each day with his head high, knowing his experience had made others see things they used to ignore. Teachers invited him to speak at assemblies, and students listened when he talked about how that one moment had opened his eyes, not just to prejudice but to courage. One afternoon, he stood on stage in front of his class, his voice calm but strong. "Sometimes," he said, "bad things happen to make people better. I used to wish it never happened, but now, I see it made our town stronger. Maybe that's how change works. It's messy, it hurts, but it teaches." The room was silent, but every pair of eyes was fixed on him. Even the kids who once joked about the video now looked at him with genuine respect. Across town, Linda's life had taken a quieter turn. She kept her promise. Every Saturday, she volunteered with the mayor's community youth program. She spent time talking to teenagers from different backgrounds, kids she once might have avoided or feared, and listened to their stories. She didn't talk much about the incident anymore, but everyone knew. She didn't need to explain. Her actions spoke for her. One afternoon, Denise visited the community center to check in. She saw Linda organizing books for the mentorship library, her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back. For a moment, she watched her silently before walking over. "Looks like you've been busy," Denise said, a small smile playing on her lips. Linda looked up, a little surprised but smiling back. "Trying to be useful," she said. "Trying to be better," Denise nodded. "You're doing both." There was a brief, quiet pause between them. Not awkward, but peaceful. It wasn't forgiveness that passed between them. It was understanding. As they walked outside together, the afternoon sun painted the street gold. Kids were laughing near the playground, some riding bikes, others chasing a soccer ball across the grass. Among them was Marcus, his laughter echoing above the sounds of summer. Linda watched him for a long moment, her eyes soft. "You raised a good boy," she said quietly. Denise looked at her son, pride in her eyes. "I tried to raise him to see the good in people, even when they make mistakes."